All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Chris Avery, and I am on the National Climate Assessment Team at the U.S. Global Change Research Program, or USGCRP. Before we get started, I want to draw your attention to the note that my colleague is going to be putting into the chat right now. Audio is disabled for all participants, but if you have questions or comments throughout today's session, please enter them into the chat. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Yishen Li, who is our technical support person today. Please also note that all participants are expected to be respectful and considerate towards each other per the USGCRP Code of Conduct. Next slide. So I'm going to kick off the webinar today with a little bit of background information about the National Climate Assessment before turning it over to Chris Laban and the other chapter authors on the transportation chapter. Next slide. The U.S. Global Change Research Program was mandated by Congress in the Global Change Research Act of 1990 to, quote, assist the nation and the world to understand, assess, predict, and respond to human-induced and natural processes of global change. The program convenes 15 agencies to advance climate and global change science and to provide useful and usable information to decision makers. Next slide. The same law that established the program also mandates a periodic scientific assessment known as the National Climate Assessment, or the NCA. If I can get the next slide. Thank you. The NCA is a quadrennial report that analyzes the effects of global change on several sectors: the natural environment, agriculture, energy, land and water resources, transportation, human health, social systems, and biodiversity. USGCRP is charged with assessing current trends as well as projections for the next 25 to 100 years. The NCA is used by organizations and individuals for a variety of purposes, including national policymaking, risk management in the private sector, local mitigation and adaptation planning, as well as by practitioners, utility managers, and educators. Next slide. NCA authors review a large body of scientific research from diverse information sources. They synthesize that information, examine the confidence in our scientific understanding, and evaluate uncertainties. NCA5 was written by 500 authors and 260 technical contributors from every state in the nation, as well as Puerto Rico, the US Virgin Islands, Guam, and Palau. NCA is designed to be policy neutral. Authors distill their findings into accessible language framed around risks to people and important resources. That said, the report is strictly not policy prescriptive and does not advocate for particular viewpoints or policy measures. The NCA uses a range of future projections to help decision makers understand the full extent of possible risks that can be avoided or reduced under different scenarios. And it leaves up to the decision maker to ultimately determine their risk threshold. The assessment is compliant with all applicable federal laws and policies, including the Global Change Research Act, as I pointed out, as well as other laws that govern things like information quality, accessibility, and transparency. And finally, the report process involves extensive review, including several opportunities for public comment, a review by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and several government science reviews. Next slide. So now let's take a look at the NCA5 table of contents. Like previous NCAs, NCA5 covers national level topics, regions, and response to actions. The report opens with an overview, which is followed by 2 chapters dedicated to the physical science of climate change. Then there are 10 national topic chapters, the 10 regional chapters, and 2 response chapters, although response actions are also discussed throughout the entire report. The NCA table of contents has evolved over time, informed by user input. NCA5 added 2 new chapters, one on economics and one on social systems and justice. We also have 5 new features on compound extreme events, Western wildfires, COVID-19, supply chains, and blue carbon. And there are also several appendices, including a new one focused on indicators. So with all of that introductory background, it's my pleasure to introduce Chris Laban, the chapter lead of the transportation chapter, who will lead us through the remainder of the webinar today. Chris?
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris, and thank you all, everyone who is attending our webinar this afternoon. I will be joined by my co-authors as well. Beverly Scott, Amy Flannery, as well as our federal lead, Rob Kapalinas, on the slides that you'll be seeing right behind the slides that I'll be describing and talking about today. So let me just start off by saying that, in this particular chapter, we have really, while our focus is on transportation, we have coordinated and collaborated with other chapters, across the multiple spectrum of disciplines that you see on this slide. And in particular, we have also contributed, to the focus on chapters, specifically the supply chain, as well as the COVID-19 focus chapters. Let's start off by saying that, in this chapter, we have considered the evolving transportation paradigms. While transportation is known and, is supposed to connect us all in terms of moving people and goods, it's an enabler of social and economic upliftment for the people who are using the system. Without people, transportation infrastructure is nothing. And with that context, we are often reminded as we're writing this chapter that, while this is an enabler of many paradigms and as well as many opportunities in our communities, transportation is changing. The nature of transportation is changing, the infrastructure associated with this is changing, and the workforce associated in those changes in the transportation sector, no matter whatever mode it is also changing. We've considered best practices to reduce the impacts of transportation to the environment, and those best practices differ by region. And also, we have considered the overall reduction in risk of climate impacts to the transportation sector. There are also co-benefits that we have considered beyond clean air, and there are trade-offs with many of the things and strategies that you'll be hearing about today as well. As Chris has mentioned, the National Climate Assessment is not prescriptive. It's designed to be relevant and understandable, and really meeting and with the goal of going down to the level of being useful for the American public. And I provide here, just in case you have not downloaded it yet, or if you haven't read the chapter yet, to essentially click and look at the QR code that we have on the right side of the screen for you to be able to access the document. Notwithstanding all different sources, transportation essentially remains the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, with cars and light-duty trucks as the largest contributor. And between 1990 and 2021, greenhouse gas emissions rose by about 19%. Nothing new. We've seen that in NCA4, and we've articulated that and updated those numbers here in NCA5. This rise is mainly attributed to an increase in vehicle miles traveled by passenger cars in all truck types. In terms of the changes in transportation, we have provided here in our figure 13.2, the shifting transportation landscape and how we respond to it will determine future climate outcomes. In the previous assessments, internet was not as, and data through the internet is not as prevalent and maybe not as significant as we're seeing right now in terms of how transportation is not only operated but also built and maintained. This implications for policy decisions and risk assessment, and therefore, in terms of climate and air quality, equity, and economic benefits, has implications for the future. Our key message number one is really all about limiting transportation sector emissions, integrating climate projections, could reduce and can reduce risks. And in this particular sense, we, as I've already mentioned, we have recognized the fact that transportation still and remains to be the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in our country. The sector also faces increasing risk from climate-related extreme weather events, and incorporating climate projections and adaptation and resilience best practices into transportation planning, design, operations, and maintenance can reduce such risks to the sector. We've articulated in key message number 1 text in the text of that key message on the different and multiple elements of these items. And we have also recognized the fact that having, and considering, especially the third bullet item in here, could reduce such risks in this sector. And I now turn over to our co-author, to essentially articulate key message number 2, Beverly Scott.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Chris, thank you very much. And I want to say that I know I speak for our entire team. I'm embarrassed you that it has been a pleasure to serve under your leadership as the leader for this transportation chapter, and it's been a real privilege. I'm going to just, in the interest of time, I'm going to try to keep this kind of short, but kind of really come in on there's no question but that climate change is a reality and it's a major driver, no pun intended, for all of us. But these were big takeaways for us, but it is really not happening in a vacuum. And that was one of the things that was just paramount as we were going, as Chris already, has kind of laid it out, is that this world is changing. Our nation is changing, our communities are changing, society's changing. And so all of this is just not happening in a vacuum, okay? And so it's important. Public values are changing, expectations of the public are changing, society overall is changing. And so all of that, in addition to what is this major driver in terms of climate, has to be taken into consideration in terms of how we strategically think, how we do things differently. So what did that mean for transportation, for the transportation sector? Most of the time, it's pretty easy. We say, well, it's bricks, it's mortar, it's facilities, it's networks, it's all of that. But for us, it was very clear that mark these down: interdependencies, no one is an island, intentionality around cross-sectoral and bigger thinking and doing, and learning how to break the silos down so that we can in fact wind up doing things in whole cloth. Okay, that is absolutely paramount, and it is very different than the ways that we have traditionally been organized, think, siloed amongst it within ourselves, in addition to what that fragmentation is across the board. Okay, and in this world, and with what's happening on with climate as well as just in general, okay, that it is a very different transportation sector. And quite candidly, most of the change is being driven by externalities to transportation. And I think that kind of says it, for what kind of some of the big ones that were going on for us in this particular chapter. So what's really happening is that we, in modern times, we don't have any normal. Our normals have totally, they've changed, they're evolving, and honestly, in a very transformative way. This is not deliberate speed. This is new technologies, all of the implications and the impacts that go along with the Internet of Things, cybersecurity, and particularly in this sector, but across the critical infrastructure sectors, issues in terms of cybersecurity, operating OT systems, IT systems, all of that integration, technology that is changing the nature. The work is changing, the workplace is changing dramatically, and the workforce is changing dramatically. New thinking and doing that needs to take place in terms of thinking of things not K to 12 and 12 to this, but in a K to great, and a whole different DNA and culture around continuous learning and getting rid of all this blue collar, white collar, and all of that. Now, we also in the transportation sector on the workforce piece, okay? And I will say that the people are always the most important asset that we have. And that's maybe a little bit of pontificating on my part. But on the but we really felt that. But on the workforce side of things, for the transportation sector, fact, we unfortunately hold the distinction amongst the sectors, the critical infrastructure sectors, of having a most aged workforce. And that really comes through in terms of our bus operators, in trucking. And so, and just for everybody, so you know, if you haven't been here, I'm assuming you kind of know transportation, but we've got aviation, maritime, heavy rail, passenger rail, buses, everything you can think of. Okay, just about in terms of safe of surface aviation and all that falls under us, as well as regulation of hazardous materials and pipelines. So it's a whole lot going on, but at the end of the day, what we said is that this also provides a tremendous opportunity, because the scripts are being rewritten. Okay, for us to wind up to be able to really do things and do them very smartly and efficiently, that will wind up being can wind up being very positive for our country and for the American people. But it's a totally it's a different ball game, and so it will, and it's not just evolving, it's transformative. So I think those are the points that I wanted. This is not with all deliberate speed. These things are urgent, and there are no silos, there are no islands, and all of us have this as we work. And at the end of the day, last comment, the most important thing will be, how do we individually, as well as this big collective, but we make this collective up. All of this is we work. And so the decisions that all of us make personally and as a public are going to be what are ultimately going to drive climate. And so so in all of these things, it's not somebody else that's up there just doing it, making these decisions. I make the decision about whether I walk, whether I take a bike, whether or not I get in an automobile, whether or not, how do I make that decision in terms of how I'm going to get my goods, my services, and all of that. Much of this is driven by as much personal decision making. So anyway, that's my contribution. And now, Chris, I turn it back to you to be able to turn it to our next speaker.
Yeah, thank you, Bev. Amy Flannery will be speaking on the next few more slides. Thanks, Bev, again.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Bev.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an image that we worked on for quite a long time to artistically depict how climate resilience and the co-benefits can come from both mitigation and resilience to essentially our world, to put it kind of in a fancy way. So some of the things we tried to capture through this image was to demonstrate how investments to decarb the transportation system can both save money and improve air quality, but also improve social equity and health of people in the ecosystem itself. So in this image, there's some investments that are sort of characterized. For example, the idea that you can have improvement in mass transit can reduce potential motor vehicle fatalities. The idea that you could invest in things like oyster reefs could reduce wave action, which would improve the resiliency of our coastal facilities, coastal transportation facilities, and protect the shoreline, but also can improve things like water quality and restoring habitats that may have been disrupted over time. We also could see things like reducing heavy vehicle idling within areas such as like ports or transport areas, could improve some of the air quality issues that we have in overburdened communities. Often these areas are located in the lower valued areas of cities and states. And so moving towards that reduction in heavy vehicle idling will help with improvements of air pollution in those areas. This was something that we spent a lot of time on as authors, and felt that it kind of also portrayed information that may be a little bit new to people to read about. And this may be an easier way to sort of absorb this information and support the reading of the text in general. Chris, you want to go ahead and move to the next slide? Within that, thinking about sort of co-benefits in general, this is one of our key messages. Our key message number 3 is looking at how investments in improving resilience, improving the climate through mitigation and adaptation could provide not only transportation benefits, but also societal benefits. So thinking about a carbon-free, sustainable, resilient transportation system could improve human health, environmental justice, the natural environment, and certainly economic development. We have very high confidence in this. There's lots of information out there that supports just the improvement and resilience of the system can lead to additional co-benefits. There's also co-benefits that can be achieved through the reduction of greenhouse gases, and that these reduction in greenhouse gases and the investments needed to do that are far outweighed by the co-benefits and the benefits that are achieved. And so this is something else that we had high confidence in and wanted to make note of, that it's not just about reducing greenhouse gases. It's not just about making the system more resilient, but both of those investments will have an improvement on our overall environment, human health, and the natural environment. Next slide, Chris. This image here was something that we were very cognizant of, though we wanted to make sure that we captured in an image. This figure shows many of the considerations that need to be taken into account when thinking about climate action and investments. Each of the tabs represent a potential trade-off. And so if you work your way around the circle here, you could see, for example, moving away from fossil fuels can have a benefit, of course, of reducing greenhouse gases, but may potentially impact transportation availability and reliability to underserved populations or communities. Another consideration when moving around the circle, things that are needed to, for example, raw materials that are needed for new technologies such as electric vehicles could potentially have an impact on our ecosystems. And so therefore, decisions that are being made for climate mitigation and adaptation, we feel need to be considered through a lens of environmental justice and community impacts, not just solely thinking about greenhouse gas reductions, but thinking about it in this context of trade-offs. Next slide, Chris. I think at this point, we just wanted to note that our key message number 4, capturing some of the co-benefits in the images previously, as well as the trade-offs, thinking about equitable distribution of transportation trade-offs and benefits requires community involvement. We recognize that we can't do this, as Bev mentioned, in a vacuum. This is something that we need to recognize. We don't always have the right answer. And as a profession, we need to engage with the public to make sure the investments that we are making and decisions that are being made don't further harm communities, and that we're aware of moving towards a more climate resilient environmental and moving towards climate resilience and environmental justice requires that we do take into consideration current and historical inequities, and that we move to address these things through transparent and inclusive processes to make sure that we are protecting the environment and health of everyone in the system and every potential user of the system. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob, who's going to talk a little bit more about just the overall impacts to the transportation profession through these considerations.
Thanks, Amy. So I'm going to start with the graphic on this slide. So this is the resilience planning cycle. This is an iterative process. It's at a higher level, but this process starts with thinking about, at the agency level, the kinds of guidelines that exist for thinking about environmental impacts, updating those to include climate change resilience issues, and then using that information to conduct climate risk assessments. This could be of anything that the Transportation Authority owns. It could be roads and bridges, highways, transit lines, and also buildings. And then from that, after understanding those risks, to develop climate risk reduction plans. And then once those plans have been developed, and decisions have been made on what to do and how to make things more resilient, the next stage is actually to implement those plans to build highways more resiliently, for example. And then after that, the next step is really to monitor those adaptations, those projects, and see how they fare over time, and then start the cycle all over again. We have similar cycles where we talk about this at the project level, which begins with understanding an individual highway or rail line and understanding the potential future of that location. So understanding how climate change could affect that location, developing adaptation options and costing those out. And then from that, deciding on particular solutions, implementing those solutions, and then monitoring them over time. These cycles are iterative, and you could say it's almost a never-ending cycle that from now on, will be wanting to look at infrastructure or things that a transportation agency owns or is involved in, and understanding how climate change could affect those and working to make them more resilient over time. Yeah. These cycles start with analysis and end with construction, and then repeat as we monitor those. These cycles kind of reflect the range of key messages that you'll find in our chapter. It includes the goal of reducing risks to communities and to assets. It includes analyzing the benefits of doing this kind of work and considering the trade-offs to develop resilience projects and make the system more resilient. Climate resilience and greenhouse gas mitigation are growing focus areas for the transportation sector. Communication is key as we do this kind of work, both internal within a transportation agency, so that the left hand and the right hand both know what each other are doing and can work together towards the same goals. But also communication with the public is also important so that the public knows why the Transportation Authority is trying to do things in a perhaps a new way, and also so that the agencies can learn from the public and get feedback from the public about different policies and projects related to greenhouse gas mitigation and climate change resilience. We have some tools and methods for analyzing climate futures and adapting transportation assets and transportation systems. The report discusses a range of examples from around the country, and we are starting to reduce risks in transportation. But there is more work to do to use and improve these methods, and ultimately to mainstream consideration of climate resilience and adaptation into the analysis of transportation projects and systems and into transportation decision-making generally. You know, the field has really progressed from recognizing and researching this issue to starting to actually implement concerns tied to both the adaptation side and the mitigation side. We're also beginning to see more dedicated funding sources, certainly at the federal level. We have new resources focused on adaptation through the PROTECT program. And then on the greenhouse gas reduction side, we have new resources coming through the carbon reduction program and the range of programs that focus on electric vehicles. These are all a good start, but we also know in the transportation sector that we have a lot of work ahead of us to apply these programs, to implement these policies, and to learn from them and work to reduce emissions and make the infrastructure more resilient. It's great to see, and Ben already talked about this, it's great to see more staff focused on addressing climate change in transportation agencies and also focusing on greenhouse gas reductions. We will need to continue to grow the capacity of the transportation workforce to apply climate change information in their work, and also to address greenhouse gases and resilience more effectively. In making the case for resilience investments and greenhouse gas reductions, we can really give more attention to the benefits of this work, of working to make transportation projects more resilient or to emit fewer greenhouse gases. There are a whole range of benefits that are discussed in the chapter, particularly in the third key message, related to improving air quality for vulnerable communities and improving ecosystem services around projects that have been adapted to future change. But there's also other benefits related to increasing safety, reliability, and providing better support for evacuations, and also reduced costs for users and agencies over the long term. A better understanding of the benefits can help put the near-term costs of adaptation and greenhouse gas mitigation into better context. The last thing I want to mention is just this issue of trade-offs. Transportation decision-making requires trade-offs, so it will be important when we plan and develop transportation projects and systems to ensure that the benefits and the disbenefits of projects are shared equitably. These considerations will become more important as we encounter more threats posed by climate change in the future. So with that, I will pass it back to Chris.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rob. In the interest of time, I have a couple more slides and just emphasizing additional resources, as well as, thanking our authors as well. So just wanted to present this particular set of resources. This is, if you haven't attended the other webinars, and this is something new to you, we've made a conscious attempt here through USGCRP and many of the author teams to actually, engage the community at the level that would be understood, so that, this policy relevant document could actually be relevant and be talked about. So Additional resources include, the QR code there in terms of art and climate types of resources we're in. There was a competition that was done to represent, some of the key messages across the multiple chapters, in this document. There's also an interactive atlas that, would be helpful for any one of you. You could go down to literally your neighborhood level, to look at climate impacts. I'd like to acknowledge the author team. The list of our author team members are here. Many of them, while they didn't speak, are part of the audience today. Our technical contributors from across the country, our review editor, John Posey, as well as, Josh Hernandez, as well as Chris Avery, who you heard from earlier today. Lillian Elisa, Susan Annenberg, Mike Chester, Josh DeFlorio, Francisco Doñas, Mike Sanyo, and Ann Stone are also part of this, in addition to the other authors that you heard here today. And finally, if you want to reference our work in your work, this is how you would do it, and hopefully you would visit not only the website, but also read through our chapter as you create policies, as well as documents, plans, in your jurisdiction. Again, thank you so much for being with us here today. We hope that this was very informative to you. It was such a privilege to be part of this 2.5 year process, and we'll be ready to answer any more questions that you might have, and we'll yield back to Chris and the GCRP staff to ask away. Thank you.